rise and start shining. A Breaking Chains podcast is here to inspire and motivate you to break the chains that bind you. Our goal is to help you achieve personal and professional growth by bringing insightful content, interviews, and stories that are geared towards increasing your awareness of self-worth and value. Join hosts Jeff Walsh and Aaron Ferguson as they take you on an experience that helps you achieve a new mindset, resulting in a life that explores and reaches its fullest potential. Change your mind, change your life. Let's go.
Aaron, what is going on?
I love that. Let's go.
Yeah, it gets you pumped up, right?
It does. It gets me pumped up and it gets me excited to chat with you and everybody else.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, we want to first say hello to our audience and say hello to those that are listening at the different apps or that are watching us live. We really appreciate your support. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate you listening to what we have to say and sharing from our heart and sharing from our life experiences and our own personal wisdom. So we appreciate you all. Without you, this is really just me and Aaron talking at each other.
That's it. It's all right. It's all good. But much, much appreciated, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love and appreciate you.
Yeah. So, Aaron, tonight we are talking about this toxic relationships, and I like the question you posed on one of our posts is it really toxic relationships, or is the quote or the phrase toxic relationship become a buzzword?
Yeah.
And I know that you have a lot of passion and a lot of things to say about this. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, what are some of your thoughts?
I've got fire in my soul over this because I get very frustrated as well as challenged when it comes to certain words and certain terms. I feel like there are a lot of people out there who abuse words, and when you take a word and you turn it into a weapon to dismantle what is actually going on with yourself, it really doesn't do anybody justice. It just is like I said, it's a buzzword. It's just another buzzword that people are throwing around using to escape any type of accountability and really to push issues off on somebody else when they most times need to look inward. You know, when you talk about toxicity, like, think of what toxic actually means. Like toxic is like really, really, really bad, right? Like toxic means there's no coming back. Like if you poison yourself and you take in toxins, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to come back from that, you know, because it's toxic. It depletes you. It destroys you. It breaks you down. It doesn't allow you to get back up, and it'll kill you. So, I mean, when someone says like, oh, that person is so toxic, I just had to get them out of my life. Like, what do you mean? Have you thought about what your role is in that toxic concoction that you're talking about, right?
Wow, I think you hit it, the hammer on the head, as they like to say, right? Because I know that, throughout my own life, I can look at different relationships and things that I've been in throughout my life, and unfortunately there's one common denominator. It's
right.
Really me.
Right.
So I can say this person was toxic or whatever, and I can say this, and I think a lot of people tend to do that. And I know that, and it doesn't matter if it's a relationship intimate or if it's
right.
just a relationship with anything, right? It can be a relationship with our view on government. It
right.
can be our relationship with really anything. And when we are saying that the thing outside of us is the toxicity, then ultimately what we are doing is, and I think we're really giving our power away, and we're saying that is causing my demise, when really ultimately I think you said it. Like, what is my role in inviting that into my life, and do I really want to be accountable for my part in it? Because we all know it takes two to dance.
Yeah,
well, I mean, kind of.
Well, I think you and I could pretty much dance on our own.
Yeah, exactly.
but no, it definitely does. I think that so many times people want to label things. They want to label things because they want to dismiss what their own actions caused within the situation. So it's easier to say this is toxic. That person's a narcissist. She's so self-centered. You know what I mean? It's so easy to say these things. She's bipolar. I mean, you know how many times I've heard people say, "Oh my God, she's so bipolar," and it's like, do you really know what that even means? Like that's an actual mental situation that people have, a mental illness that people have. Like, it's not like, this isn't like, you know, she can't choose a color from another color. Like, it's a big thing. And I think, you know, when you start using these words and start labeling people, for the love of God, like, where's the judgment on yourself? Where's the accountability for yourself? We all contribute to situations. And I'm not talking about just like boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, spouse. I'm talking family toxicity. I'm talking friendships. I'm talking any type of relationship that's out there. At work, sometimes your boss, you know, and you're the employee, and that could be deemed, you know, quote unquote toxic. But there's a whole big thing that happens within that relationship. It's not something that, once again, you're just throwing a label at just because you want to dismiss your ownership in the situation. And I think way too often we are passing judgments, and way too often we're labeling situations and people when what does toxic even really mean? What does that look like, you know?
Right. It's interesting. I had created a post probably, I don't know, a few months back, and it was in lines with this conversation, and it was, you know, aimed at, you know, let's not, first of all, 1% or less of the population are considered narcissists, right? Or psychopaths, right? Because that's really ultimately at some level the same connotation as the other. And I created a post and saying that not everybody, like, you know, not everybody's a narcissist because they behave a certain way, or like narcissistic personality is very rare. Actually, you know, a lot of people are operating from our trauma, and it's the same thing with toxic, you know, and I think ultimately when we're in any form of relationship and we're accusing the other of being the issue and the problem, we really have to bring awareness, and it's not easy, but bring awareness back to, okay, what part am I playing in this? You know, what part am I playing in the reality of this quote unquote toxic relationship? And again, you know, I can use an example. One of my, in my own personal life, you know, when I first got out of prison, I was constantly blaming the system, if you will. But there was a lot of things that I was also not looking at inwardly about my own belief systems, about the system, or this or that. And so it's just, again, taking what I've learned for me is that I have to take my power back by bringing it back to me and saying, what can I look within, and what can I be accountable for myself, and work on myself to better improve what I'm experiencing in relationships outside of me. And so I totally get it. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is a better word or a better phrase or a better way to explain struggles in relationships? Because we understand that it's a pretty common thing. I mean, you know, besides all the fake, images that we see on social media and things like that, the reality is that what is being portrayed on social media and things like that is far from what's going on behind closed doors. People are seriously in a lot of relationship struggles. And so I would ask you, what do you think, what's a good or a healthier way to look at some of these things?
Well, I think that it's really important to, first of all, recognize what, quote unquote, toxic means to you. I'm somebody who's really against those types of labels. Like, if someone's a jerk, they're a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, you can understand why you would say someone is a jerk, but saying that someone is toxic, what does that mean? So I think you really need to first identify exactly what that means to you. The second thing is that when you talk about, like, a relationship, say between a family member, and things went wrong, when you say that this person is toxic or this situation was toxic and I just had to get away, and I just had to, like, cut it off and set boundaries, which that's like a whole other buzzword, this whole boundary. I need boundaries, and of course that there are healthy, quote unquote, boundaries that you put in place to deal with certain situations because that relationship isn't working for you. But when you put labels and stuff like that on it, it's really just kind of saying that you threw your hands up and you walked away and you felt a certain way and that's the way you viewed it. And so now you're just done with it. But when you look at a relationship, and that's fine to do if that's what you want to do, but it's not necessarily healthy. When you look at a relationship, it's really supposed to be a two-way street. And there's things that I'm going to contribute that you're not going to like. There's things that you're going to contribute that I don't like. At the end of the day, if your characters don't align, if your morals don't align, if your views don't align, and it's okay to be, have different opinions and stuff like that. But if there's really very, very many core differences, it simply means that you just aren't a fit. And that is perfectly okay. It doesn't make you toxic. It doesn't make the other person toxic. It simply means that you are not people who are meant to be in this big, impactful relationship with one another. But to call that toxic, I think it's so immaturely, immaturely, and I hate to say this, but immaturely self-centered. I really do.
Well, I think that the labels, they are a form of ego, right?
Absolutely.
And again, I'm not minimizing the fact that some people go through really, really horrible relationships and find that they are abused and I mean there's the reality of it, right?
Yep.
But for what I've experienced, and I think what what you've been passionate about through our conversations the last 24 hours about this is the reality that it's not really, it's more of like, let me put a label on the other individual so that I can feel better about who I am.
Right.
Right. And that to me is it's a big like trend right now.
It's a huge trend, but this is exactly, and I'm going to say this and it's going to stop where it needs to stop, but that's like the whole like wokeness in life right now that we're seeing everywhere, right? And like all of these different things, right? Because it's almost this culture of like, well, this is how I feel and I'm the only person who's right and you're wrong, so you're toxic, so goodbye. That kind of mentality is getting us in so much trouble with family, with friends, in the world, any type of relationships out there. So, again, bringing it back to the whole like toxic thing, people in life go down different paths. We make mistakes. We sometimes we make really, really big mistakes. Sometimes we don't treat people the right way. Sometimes we don't say the right things. Sometimes we don't buy the right gifts. Sometimes it's just, we're just a mess.
Sometimes you don't vote for the right president. I mean,
right.
you know?
Sometimes you don't vote for a right president. Sometimes, but, and it's just a big mess. So, but you, that doesn't mean that that person who makes these mistakes is this toxic, horrible human being. It means that there's traumas or there's things in their lives that have contributed to their behaviors and their actions. And it doesn't excuse them, but to just label someone, oh, they're toxic and just walk away, it's such a, again, immature, self-centered type of a way to look at things.
God, this is reminding me of like the cancel culture too.
Yeah,
you know, it's so much. It's my way, and I've noticed, you know, there's just so much.
And do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, there's just so much ego involved in personal belief systems. And the way that I view, and I think a lot of us, we need to return back. And I, you know, even been looking at my own self at certain areas in my spiritual beliefs and things like that. It's like, I don't need to be right anymore.
No.
And I think that
I do.
Kidding. Well, you know, it's because but that goes right in line with like this, you know, that person's toxic, that person's a narcissist. I'm the empath and you're the narcissist, or I voted right and you voted wrong, or I know what the vaccine is for and you don't. Like all of this polarization, as if
any of us
have it exactly right.
None of us know. And I'm a fighter. Yeah. I mean, I'm somebody who gets very passionate about things. I will say what I need to say. But I will say this, is that through everything, I really do, whenever I put things out there or say things or question things, I really do it with the intent of explaining my perspective of it, but also learning from it. And if I'm proven wrong, by God, prove me wrong. And I will admit to that. I'm a fighter. I'm a right fighter at times, but I will admit when I am wrong. And that goes with relationships.
It's just not often, right?
It's not. I'm not wrong often. But when I am, I will admit that I'm wrong. No, and this goes with relationships, right? So I am not somebody who I have little fires in my life. There are a couple of relationships in my life that just don't work. I've been labeled toxic. I'm sure I've thrown that word out once or twice myself before I really started to grasp how much I hated that word. And I can honestly say that in looking at the little fires in the relationships that I have complications with, I 100% have contributed to things within those relationships to get us to where we are today. There is not a doubt in my mind that I have not contributed in some way, some form, and I 100% hold myself accountable for those things. At the end of the day, if you want to walk away from a relationship because it no longer serves you, that is 100% your choice, and you should do it. If it makes you and your life better, easier, happier, even though you're sad, love them from a distance. But that doesn't mean that that person is toxic. It just means that you guys don't fit, you don't work, and that is perfectly okay.
Right,
So,
because I think when I label that other person toxic, what I'm saying is that I have no issues, right? Right. So
it's
like,
crazy.
I mean, listen. I just want to make sure we make this really clear. I have got everything figured out, and
everything.
I have never been the toxic person. Just so we're square, okay? I want to make sure we get that right, okay? No, I think this is important because, again, in a lot of the conversations that we've had, even last week, we're about accountability, and that's why we're continuing in this vein, if you will. It's because ultimately And I'm a strong believer of personal accountability, right? Awareness to my part in it all. Like, if I'm in a relationship, besides like my parents, because I had no choice, right? I was born into that, right? I was born into my brother and sister. So family's a little bit different. But outside of that, I have to see, like, how did I allow, like, what inside of me allowed that into my life? And I think here's the real thing is that usually, generally speaking, what I've learned recently in my life is that when I'm experiencing toxic, quote unquote, relationship in any level outside of myself, it really is because I'm having my own inner toxic relationship with myself.
Yeah, and I also think that it's important to understand that even though, like, you don't want to take blame off of people and just put it on yourself, and you don't want to take blame and just put it on people and excuse yourself. Like, I think that there really has to be like a balance. And I think that when we talk about accountability, that we're talking about a balance with accountability. It's kind of like a scale, like a shifting scale, and sometimes you're going to be more right. Sometimes you're going to be more wrong. And that's kind of how it goes in all relationships, but I also, I don't know. I think that accountability plays a really big role, and I think that ego, humbling yourself, and I think that growth plays a really big role.
Yeah.
And being able to release the labels is where you really start to grow, because then you can look inward and you can hold yourself accountable for something that within that relationship, because it is not just the other person. It never, ever, 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 ever will be. So if you are sitting there right now and you think, oh my God, this person was in my life, they were so toxic, I'm so happy they're gone, I'm so much better off without them, everything else. Have you thought at all about your contribution to that? Because I'm telling you, it is never, ever one-sided. So
yeah, it's interesting too, because I was in the shower this evening and I was thinking about toxic relationships. And what I was really aware of was the fact that because my life was full of my own inner struggles, a lot of my relationship. So I haven't really, like, for a long time in my life, my relationships were what we would call, quote unquote, toxic. And it's almost like I became addicted to having that, like, chaos in my life. So much so that I didn't know what healthy relationship actually looked like, right? And it was never one person's fault. It was always a multiple. And it didn't matter if it was friends, right? Like for me, learning how to have friendships with people outside of drinking and outside of like doing, crazy things, or, having relationships with females outside of whatever that is, right? It's like I was addicted to that chaos. And so retraining and relearning how to have deep connection with people in a healthy way, for me, has been some of the most powerful things that I've been learning. And it ultimately did really start with me being able to have that relationship with myself.
Well, and this also, right, and self-love and everything else.
Right.
I mean, that plays such a huge role, and I don't think any of us have that fully figured out either. But this also goes back to a lot of some of the other things that we've discussed in the past, which is product of your environment, the way that you're raised, your family dynamic, all of these things really contribute to the relationships that you start to have when you're younger, with your peers, with your first boyfriends, with all of these different people, and what matters to you and what doesn't. And it sets a tone, right? So then you're in this zone with this tone of what a relationship should be, or or you start to latch on to things that make you feel good during those times when you're younger and you have no idea what you're doing. Like how many times were you in love as a teenager? I mean, I was in love like 500 times and, was going to get married to every single guy that I dated back then. And it's just absolutely insane. So I hope my daughters don't date until they're like 35. But anyway, it's one of those things that, you're a product of your environment. So all of this stuff happens and you start forming these relationships and you get comfortable in the chaos or in liking a certain thing that may or may not be good for you. And then you continue down this path of relationship after relationship, doing the same thing over and over because you're constantly trying to recreate a feeling that you had at one point in your life, and it's not serving you anymore. Because you're growing, you're getting older, you're changing, your environment's changing, your life is changing, hopefully. So this all plays a big role into where your relationships go. And if you can come back into yourself and come back into your own and figure out maybe where that started to go wrong, then you can start building those blocks up again to release that quote unquote toxicity within yourself and start to establish healthier relationships moving forward and stop blaming everybody else for it and really looking at yourself.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well said. And that's why I talk about addiction not just being drugs and alcohol.
Absolutely.
What you just explained was the reality of someone who suffers from a physical addiction to drugs or alcohol, but it is no different. People experience these addictions, chemically speaking, to these relationships, and I don't know how many people I've heard tell me, especially with the work that I do, this person was no good, this person was no good, this person was no good. And I sit back and I listen with no judgment because I get it. But I wonder, like, do you really fully understand that you were the common denominator in all of those relationships?
Right.
And that is that's the work, is to figure out why, right? Why am I attracting and creating these types of relationships? And that goes back to what you were saying, that environment, and how do I heal the trauma? Like for me as a child, I remember, when I was 7 years old and we lived in Toms River, my parents are only 27 years old, and, I lived in a pretty tough area. And I remember as a 7-year-old kid, like seeing like my neighbors, a husband and wife, like beat the snot out of each other.
Yeah.
And like, this is what I'm seeing, right, as a 7-year-old kid. And I'm not saying that's the norm but a lot of people experience these traumatic things, or they experience these types of things, I think more so than not, right? I think because, if we look at economically, there's like the top 5%, and they might not see, that type of environment, but 90, 80, 70%, I don't know the exact statistics.
There's a lot.
Yeah,
There's
of
a
people
lot.
are experiencing trauma because it's generational, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that actually really does start to annoy me, and this is something that I do get very passionate about, is the fact that there are those people who haven't experienced things like that, who haven't seen things like that, who don't know what those types of traumas are in their life, and thank God for them.
Right.
Like I'm happy that they've never experienced certain things in their lives. But then when they sit there and say, well, that person's toxic because A, B, C, and D, that gets my blood boiling, because you don't understand. Right. And you're placing judgment on people when you really have no place to place that judgment, because you haven't experienced any of the traumas. And again, it's not trying to say that, there isn't, there shouldn't be accountability for people's actions. There should be, but don't sit there and think that all and, oh, well, that person's just toxic, because that's crazy. You don't understand what this person has been through, or what path they've walked down, or what they've seen in their life.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people really need to humble themselves. I also think that, I'm somebody, I had mentioned that I have a couple of fires in my life, a couple of relationships that don't work that well for me. The people that these relationships don't work with that well, we all are kind of similar in some ways. We're very strong women. We're very controlling women. We're people who like are kind of bosses and know what we want in life and everything else. And so I think sometimes when you have relationships like that, it can get very confusing because you love these people dearly, but there's something in you that you're always trying to prove yourself, or you're always trying to be the top dog, or you're always trying to have that control. And in a lot of times, in relationships, to relinquish that type of control when that has been your surviving, I don't know the word, plight or, role in your life, the way that you've survived is through control in your life. It's very hard to relinquish that. So,
Yeah.
I think sometimes that we have to look at that as well. I know I do in my life, which is a very hard thing for me. It's something that I struggle with, and try to settle down with the amount of control that we have, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
But I am very controlling. So
Hey, at least you know it, right? I mean,
little controlling.
You are a Taurus, right?
I am a bull.
Yeah, you are.
Straight up Taurus bull.
I think, it's an interesting dynamic when we're putting blame on the other person. And I think, the reason that we're talking about this is not to bring judgment on either side, because I've been a part of both of those sides. So again, that's why I love being able to talk about all these things, because my life was full of so much that I get to speak about these things from both sides. And ultimately what we're trying to really share with people is like less judgment, right? Less judgment, more compassion, more true empathy. And I think you really, said something that's important, is that, I've seen something that was on Facebook or something, and it was like basically everybody lined up in a straight line, and it was going to be like a 50-yard race, right? And then the guy was basically like, if you had, two parents who graduated college, take a step forward. And if you had college paid for you or whatever, take a step forward. If you, all these different advantages that people are, experience in life. And basically the point was, at the end, when he was done asking all of these questions, what you saw was that it wasn't an equal race anymore. The people that had all of these advantages, that didn't experience the type of things that other people may have experienced, were 30 yards ahead in a 50-yard race. And I think that people need to realize that, like, and I'm passionate about this, when you're walking past that person on the street that's homeless, right? Instead of looking at them as a toxic person or a bad person, see me. See
Absolutely.
me, because that was me. Like, that was me with the cardboard box, holding a cardboard box saying, can you help me? Like, I was a father, I was a son, I was a good man. And, I think, was I exhibiting bad behaviors and what we would consider toxic? Sure, of course. You don't wind up on the corner of a street holding a sign begging for money if you're not exhibiting some unhealthy behaviors. But let's recognize that those unhealthy behaviors are not necessarily because that person is quote unquote toxic, and toxic is correlated with bad, right? There's more to the story than meets the eye. And this is something that I work with on myself. I mean, even with all the things that I've been through, I realize that sometimes I'm disconnected, or I even find myself having a judgment, of somebody on social media or this or that. We're all privy to that reality. We all have judgments. We all have these preconceived notions. When I look at somebody, literally within 2 seconds, I have an automatic nervous connection. I have a belief, and just working through the awareness of that and making. Listen, how many people have blocked me, family members, because of politics, because of this, because of the vaccine. Listen, I'd rather not be right.
Right.
Let's piece back some of these relationships that, before. I'm sad over the divide that we see. And I know we're getting off a little bit here, but it's coming up, and it's just it's really important that, like, we remember what really connects us, our humanity, right? Like, what connects us, and try to find that place where it's like no longer that this person is separate from me, but this person is one with me in a sense, right? And stop labeling each other as bad.
Well, and I also think that we have to take the gloves off and appreciate and respect and learn and grow from one another. And if someone has a different opinion than yours, why does that mean you have to hate that person? Mm-hmm. If someone's narrative isn't the same as yours, if someone believes something that you may not believe in, why does that turn into, and that word toxic isn't being used in these situations, but that's basically what people are saying, like, right. Oh, that person is so wrong, and he's an idiot, and I don't want anything to do with him. Why? Because you disagree with their thought process on something that really none of us know is what's factual anymore anyway. So why would you do that? We need to take the gloves off, come back to the center of the table, because unity is not conformity. And if you want real solutions and real things to happen, those things happen when people from different backgrounds, different sides, different everything come to the table, work together, and come up with the best solutions for everybody and for the majority of people. So appreciate and respect people for their differences. That is where the beauty in this world lies, is through the differences that people bring to the table and the different things and the different cultures. And it's such a beautiful and incredible thing that we just need to take the gloves off and stop labeling, stop judging. And look, we all do it, like you said. We always will do it, right. But do it at a lesser degree. Do it at a degree that, like, isn't going to tear people apart, or families or relationships and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, the only person that you're really going to hurt is yourself. So
yeah. We've got to come back together as a whole, and I know we're kind of going off topic, but this is where we went. Maybe even you and I will start addressing some more of these life issues and things that we're facing as a nation and as a world. It's I think it's important. Listen, I have beliefs. Me and you have disagreed on many things, right?
Yeah.
But we have to be able to disagree and still be able to hug.
Yes. Learn from one another.
Yeah. Because, listen, I've listened to people that have shared things over the past, let's call it 2 years, and I've changed my mind on quite a few things. And I think that really ultimately what I would like to see most of us is be willing to be open to the fact that we don't have it right. At least be willing to be open to that, because really that is like letting go of the ego to be. Listen, I'm very opinionated. You're very opinionated. Like, we're strong personalities, and a lot of people are that way. We're
passionate.
Yeah,
we're very passionate people.
Yeah, and but I think, like I said, it's really ultimately being able to be like, Aaron, I don't really agree with the way you're looking at that, but still be able to give you a hug. And you know, if we can't do that, what are we teaching our children, right?
Absolutely. I will say this. I think that the biggest, most toxic thing in this world, in relationships, is the divisiveness that is caused from absurdities such as opinions and stuff like that. So if you want to label anything as toxic, let's label the divide as toxic, because that is what is killing us, whether it's relationships, worldviews, politics, teachers unions, whatever the case may be. That is what's toxic. So there, you want to label something toxic, there you go. You've got my pass to put a label on that, because that is where toxicity lies.
Yeah. Our inability to come together, you know, and reason with one another has escaped our social construct, if you will. It literally, the polarization and the need to be right is alarming in our nation, and I'm assuming it's global, but in our nation it's alarming. Everybody has the answer with no evidence to the facts. I mean, I shouldn't say no evidence, right? We all have bits and pieces and this and that, but it's just, I'm learning for me, and this is for me, is to take the road of a little bit more of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know right now. Maybe in 5 years we'll know, you know, or you know, and there's a lot of polarization taking place, and I think in a lot of ways it's really a reflection of the individual. I think there's a lot of, you know, I want to say awakening, if you will. I hate using that cliche. That's I don't really like using that word because it's
a good word.
Yeah, it is. But you know, and I think that's what we're seeing. It's like a manifestation, because everything is macro, micro, right? So what we see as the macro is really happening at the micro level, which is within the individual. So I'm hopeful, but I think we need, and we're way off target now, but I think
we are.
Which I think is good. I think it's good. New, you know, continued leadership at all levels. I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about across the board. Leaders that are going to lead with empathy and compassion, and So.
And that's in your own home. That's in relationships. That's in it all. Look in the mirror. Drop the toxic label. That is a buzzword, and it does not serve anybody. If you want to get into why relationships don't work, figure it out. Do the work. Look at yourself. Figure out what you did wrong, what you contributed, what that person contributed, how it could have gone differently, what you could have done, what that person could have done, what would have made it better. And at the end of the day, if you're just not a fit, you're just not a fit. Love from a distance. But stop with that toxic label. I can't stand it, guys. It is a straight up buzzword.
Yeah.
We're zinging it off.
Just do as I say. That's it.
Do as I say. That's it.
That's it. We'll be really good then.
I hate that word.
Yeah, I started to hate the word narcissist, and that's when I created a post about 3 months ago or 4 months ago, when I was like, listen, hey, let's stop calling people. And I'm not minimizing that there are people that have experienced it, but it's such a small percentage of people, literally statistically. This is a psychological personality type. This isn't like, you know, they were mean.
But that's the thing, is every time I click on Facebook, which is like 1,000 times a day, somebody else is posting something about, oh, this is toxic. Oh, that person was so toxic. Oh my God, that relationship was so toxic. Did you see how toxic she was to him? It's like, oh my God, shut up. That is a buzzword. You people have abused it. Now I'm over it. You figure it out. You have to do the work, you know, and no one, it is never one-sided. And trust me, some of my little fires, I would love to say it is all that person because, you know, I'm always right. But it's not just that person. I've contributed to it 100%. And I think that the only way to grow and to move forward is to drop the labels and do the work that you need to do.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm going to maybe end with this, and then if you have anything after to say this, but what I've learned is that the more that I learn to really like me, right? The more that I learn to appreciate who I am, and the more that I heal my toxic behaviors or my bad behaviors or mindsets or belief systems, the more that I heal that, the less that I say that is in somebody else, right? Because now I see you. When I look at you, I see what I see inside of me, right? And when I see good inside of me, I'm going to see good inside of you. And a lot of times when I'm looking at the ugly inside of somebody, it's because it's still inside of me.
Yeah,
and,
I would have to agree with that.
Yeah,
And just one more thing. I think, you know, and I can't stress this enough, I think that there are relationships that just don't work.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Do you know what I mean? I think that sometimes we put too much pressure on trying to figure all of this out. And sometimes they just don't work. Sometimes you're just not a click. You're not a fit with somebody. And that's okay. Just let it be.
Yeah, it's been like 20 people for me. I mean, I've been in like 20 relationships in my life.
My list is like 100 long. Just keeps growing.
There's actually probably a few that I was a fit with, but I was the toxic person back then.
Lordy.
Yeah.
We are the ones who created that word. No, I'm kidding.
I know, right? Probably. It was my face on the No, I wasn't. Yeah. I was always actually a pretty decent, I'm all right.
We all are pretty decent.
Yeah. So awesome. Yeah. We appreciate everybody listening and joining and really listening in with us, and you can catch us live. We're still changing the dates around, but make sure you catch us live either Tuesday or Thursday right now. Right now it's Tuesdays, 5:30 to 8:30, even though this is Thursday. That's all right. And
we have a toxic relationship with time.
There you go. Yeah, because Erin had her tooth pulled out. Are you feeling better, by the way?
No, I don't feel good right now. I am swollen. It's throbbing. I'm ready to...
What tooth? It wasn't your wisdom, right?
It was a molar, though.
Yeah.
So I got a big old hole in there.
No fun.
This is what happens. You hit 40 and it's time for dentures.
Easy, man. I feel great. I'm 44. I feel great.
I'm 41 and I feel like...
Well, I'll tell you what. When I was 34... I felt that way. So, anything is possible. It's
absolutely.
I'm starting to feel more alive than I have in most of my adult life. But make sure you follow Erin. What is it on your Instagram?
Happy Holidays by Frankly Ferguson, where I inspire people through my holiday and celebration designs to make life magical.
Awesome. And you can follow me at Jeff Walsh Breaking Chains here on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm a transformational life coach helping people live the best version of themselves and really deal with the belief systems that keep us kind of stuck in repetitive behavioral patterns that don't serve us. Really breaking those patterns and breaking those belief systems and dealing with the mindsets associated with that is kind of what I help people through, and yeah, that's who we are, right?
That's it.
Awesome.
We are a bunch of Erin, rise and start shiners.
Until next time. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Rise and Start Shining, a Breaking Chains podcast. You can follow us on our social media platforms through the links listed on the screen below. Remember to always rise and start shining and live your best life by breaking the chains that bind you. Inspiration, motivation, determination. Let's go.